control everything or everyone, that ends up usually being a reflection of we're not tending to something for ourselves.
And we all have this different thing of what that is. And it does evolve at different times in our lives, right? Just on what
we love about people, or that's how we learn, is that we're not the same.
I think we all need to get better at taking care of our personal needs because it spills into everything else. So today I have Gabby Reece on the podcast, author, mother, athlete, entrepreneur, all the things, right? We talk about what it's like to connect to our inner wisdom and to navigate life and to say, hey, how far can we take this? Where can it go? Being loose with our concepts in the beginning. And then as we start finding momentum and purpose and passion, honing those in tighter and deeper and harder, which then allow us to pursue and achieve so much more. So listen in on today's podcast as I interview this amazing guest. No, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today because you are a wealth of knowledge in so many fields that, author, athlete, model, entrepreneur, mother, speaker, author. Everything. Like, is what's on the list that you haven't checked yet that you're desiring to do?
That's a great question. I think the verdict's out on some of my quests. So I guess part of it would be bringing some of them over the finish line. Some are ongoing forever and ever. But I think with my businesses, it's just, really seeing them for real over the finish line. And there's multiple finish lines, and with my kids, I think like every parent, even though everyone thinks, oh, they're 18 or they're 21, but I have a 27-year-old. It's like there's multiple finish lines even within parenting. I don't know. I guess, and this might sound selfish, but I think now that my kids are getting a little bit older, there's a part of me that sort of go, what's next? It would just be to ramp up and put more energy into the business side of things, the sort of the me side of things. I think you sort of defer for a long time. And it's natural. You want to your partner, to your children, because it is the time to do that. And now I can feel like I'm sort of trying to redirect and sort of, maybe eat up a little more personal real estate, at least professionally. Within the family, I always want to serve them. But I think that would be what's next.
Oh, I like it. So I was doing the stereotypical stay-at-home mom thing and I loved it. But then all of a sudden my kids got a little bit older and you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, what do I do from 9 to 3? And so then you volunteer in the classrooms and the different pieces. And I love the moms that love Pinterest and sweaters that match holidays and all those kind of brownie cookie baking things. That's not me. And I just didn't have a space to be me, which was very challenging because I felt guilty. Like, oh, I should want this because that's what everybody seems to want, but it's not relating to me. Got into a horrible car accident. And that gave me permission to say, oh, I'm allowed to do whatever sets my heart on fire. Because if I do that, I'm demonstrating what that looks like to my kids. And we all have this different thing of what that is. And it does evolve at different times in our lives, right? Just on what the kids need, what the businesses need, what your personal needs are. And I think we all need to get better at taking care of our personal needs because it spills into everything else.
Well, I think that couldn't be more true. And I think this idea of looking outside, either to control everything or everyone, that ends up usually being a reflection of we're not tending to something for ourselves. Because the more I'm kind of good, the less I am actually running around. And it's not in my nature so much to try to control, because I think I already learned that lesson, that's just an illusion that we keep to try to feel safe. So I think the more I'm sort of cool, I have a greater tolerance for allowance, whether it's with a person that I have a casual relationship that we have a big difference of opinion, whether it's a child who does things very differently than I would do them, as the all intelligent parent, I wouldn't do it that way, or to my husband, where it's like, yeah, okay, that I wouldn't say that joke or talk that loud, but hey, rock on, so.
I love you. I love that you bring like talk that loud or say that joke, right? Because we're all of those relationships with our spouses. We're like, Oh, you're my spouse and you said that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That if you're in a partnership, right? If your partner wants to sing a song and stand on the table, that your job is to get the spoons and the knives and play the water glasses for them. And just to keep reminding ourselves like, hey, that's what we love about people, or that's how we learn, is that we're not the same.
Right. How was it? Because I look at your career path. How did you transition from athlete to mother? Because you played volleyball pregnant, you were big with Nike at the time. That's a huge transition.
I guess one thing was fortunate for me is maybe I didn't wrap up all of my self-worth and my identity in being an athlete. I think I learned a lot, maybe because I was late to it. So it wasn't always my thing. Like I was always tall. That was unavoidable, but sort of, I don't know. I think, and growing up in the Caribbean, I think, identity wasn't pushed on us as much. Like you have to be something and do something, and so I think that kind of, you're just a human being, and I'm exploring this right now and I'm exploring that. I think that was very, very helpful.
And that's probably carried into the whole business pursuits too, right? Like, hey, now we're going to get into like the Laird coffee creamers and all those fun things. And you guys did that together. And then you have the XPT, which I really want to talk about the XPT because I've been researching that. That's your baby with your HIIT exercises that you've coined as well. And has all of this been, hey, this is exciting to me, I'm going to pursue it, and you don't have, you talk about getting things to the finish line, but it seems like you're very open to the flow of how they're unfolding as well.
I think it's an interesting thing of sort of like rack focus, right? Like super close, tight focus way back. And I think when you're starting a project, it should be like, oh, this is interesting, or this is showing up and the light sort of shines on a path that you're like, you know what, it feels like I should move into this, and I authentically like it. I'm interested. I could show up and solve some of those problems, because I always, I've been told, and I believe it to be true. It's like when you wake up each day, what problems do you want to be solving? Because you will be solving something. So why not something that you're into? And I can say that for personal relationships or other. It's like, and then I think as you start to get into it and you get more information and you understand it more, then maybe it becomes about being more strategic and more kind of driving it in a direction. But I don't think to be transactional or to always have a reason why you're doing something in the beginning maybe doesn't allow for the thing to blossom, to be like, oh, wait, do I even want to do this? And then once you get into it, you go, oh, I'm learning about it. I'm learning about shelf velocity on product. I'm learning about, margins and all these things. Then you start to drive, but not ahead. And, listen, that's maybe why I'm not as successful as maybe certain people, like meaning like there are people who pursue a business and they come from Wharton and they understand kind of all these things that buckets you have to tick to make a business successful. So everything is modeled around that. So I understand that too. But if you ask me personally, as somebody who is more of an entrepreneur, and you take your lumps in a really different way for that, because there's a naivety sometimes to things. But that's sort of how it has shown up for me over these years.
So the company now, right? The coffee creamery and all the different products there. I actually used it this morning. If anybody wants to know, the vanilla creamer is fantastic. With that, yeah, I mean it is. It's awesome, right? When you guys took that public, how was that process? Because that's a whole different monster of, hey, this is something that I need to keep enough energy in my body to do my sport that I love. Now all of a sudden I'm selling it. Now all of a sudden I'm taking this public.
Yeah, it was, that's like the grown up stuff. You're happy it's during COVID because you're doing a road show, which if anyone knows about a road show, it's like you'd have to go to Minneapolis and Boston and New York and sort of talk to the bankers and say, this is what we're doing, and have to try to do 100 of those. And instead we got to do that. I remember one week we did 35 in a week. It was just Laird and I were joking that, we had to have 3 minutes in between calls, and it felt like we'd be like, oh, we could go in the kitchen and get something to drink. And you have your grown up top, but I was probably in sweatpants most of the time. So I think what was cool about the road show and then going public in September of 20 was we'd never done that before. So you sort of go, hey, in my life, the chances of me ever doing this again are probably very close to zero. And I'm going to take it in as a really unique experience and a learning experience, a hard experience. And then also the things that come along with now having a publicly traded company in a market that's not great for, consumable good products. The the hits, the lessons keep coming, but I'm glad because that wasn't never the intention. So it's really cool that you get to go through it. But I also understand like older, wiser business guys that we are friends with were like, "Oh, you're going to go public? It's expensive to to the cost of keeping a company public. Now you're reporting how you're making decisions, all these things. It's very interesting."
Yeah, and I like even the words you're using, interesting and experience, and you're giving that word gives you space to say, hey, this is what shows up, and we're going to navigate it, and we're only doing this maybe once in our life, so let's make the most out of whatever this circumstance is and keep going forward. So
Well, yeah, I interviewed an athlete named Christian McCaffrey. He's a football player for the San Francisco 49ers. And he was talking about like when it's not going well, let's say, or he's hurt or he doesn't have a good game or he's not on a good team or whatever the million things are. And he said, in that moment, it's like you have two choices. Like you're going to press forward or you're going to, kind of cry about things. And what does the one do for you? It does nothing. And so I think athletics has always taught me, yeah, I'm going to honor how I really feel. I can have no problem. I can have a 3-minute pity party like nobody's business. And then it's like, cool. Now what's the objective at hand? What's the goal? What are you going to do? Because the one it just doesn't do anything.
solve anything.
It doesn't do anything. And those are hard things. There's people who be like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, I totally understand that. I think from sports, it's like, it's even like standing out on a court and getting completely demolished by another team. You can't leave. You have to just stand there and it's watch and feel it happen and be like, wow, this is this is really humiliating. And I can't, I'm not doing anything that's making it different. And I think it teaches you about like, you have choices too.
No, definitely. I played tennis for a while. I did soccer longer, but like if you got mad about that shot and you took it into your next shot, you just lost the whole game. Like the game was get the anger out, do the next swing, get the anger out, do the next swing. And that repetition physically, I really feel gives you an advantage mentally and emotionally when you come into these other things in life because you remember, okay, this is how we do it. It doesn't define me unless I keep repeating it.
And sometimes it's the constant tune up of perspective, 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 perspective. It's like, you know,
Yeah, yeah. So XPT, is that your baby, Laird's baby, your baby together? Like, talk to us about that program because that's exciting. I like this.
yeah, XPT, we created that business, I believe, in, I don't know, 2015. 2015 seemed like we were doing a lot of things, but all it was I have a very close friend that I've been friends with that also was a professional volleyball player who works with Laird and I since forever. We've been friends for maybe 28 years, and then we played, and I was roommates with her prior to knowing Laird, and sort of we've always worked together. And she said to me, you should take what you and Laird do at home and share with your friends and see if you can disseminate it down enough and share with other people. And I was like, nobody wants to do this. And, she's like, well, we're going to do an experience. People are going to come for 3 days. I go, we have nothing to offer people for 3 days, like 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. Cool. And so we put it together. And I will say one of the successes of XPT. So XPT is sort of Laird's creativity, then timing. People were reinvigorated by Wim Hof using, heat and ice or ice. Pool training, which was how do I prolong my training without sort of really hurting my body, which helped me as well. And we developed that curriculum. We were his sort of crash test dummies, if you will, which was great. And so XPT was born out of that. And now I will say the magic also of XPT is we're not fixed. So we're saying, hey, listen, this is what we know today. Because it's very interesting when you get into training modalities and just like training as a person, you have to keep integrating things that make sense that are new and different. Not be all over the map, but be like, you know what, this keeps showing up that it works. So XPT has some flexibility into it because we're not saying, hey, it's in stone. It has some fundamental, it's breathe, move, and recover. Are sort of the pillars. And the other great thing about it is the people we have around us. So I have very, very smart movement specialists. We have a guy named PJ Nestler, he's the head of programming, where you go, oh, I have an idea, and he can put pen to paper and actually make it alive so that we can then share it with other people. So the other part of that is any business is having really exceptional people around you.
Yes, the people make all the difference, and the journey fun, right? So I'm into mountaineering. I have one more mountain left to get my Guinness World Record, so holding on to that. It's Mount Logan. It's located in North America, so it's the North American peak. I actually went there last year, and we did not summit. We were 2 days from the summit. So it's horrible because now I know what I'm walking into, right? Like when you go the first time, you're this innocent bliss of, hey, whatever it is, I just have to suffer through it and I'm going to be done. And then when the Parks Canada pulled us off the mountain because of weather concerns and things like that, I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to come back. I have to do this again. Are you kidding me? Now I know, like, this isn't fair. So
Is there a time of year that those conditions are more favorable? Maybe.
yeah, so I'm leaving May 16th. So May 16th is like my chance. I have a team. We're going lean and mean. So I have there's 3 of us total. Just less people to get sick, less people to feed, less people to whatever. We're hoping it's going to take us 3 weeks, and it's exciting. It's nerve wracking. It's all those things where the site at the end of the goal felt so far away a couple of years ago. And now that I'm one mountain away from it being done, like there's awesome to that. There's sadness to that. There's like all the pieces to it because man, this is something I put all my focus on for a couple of years and it's going to be done. I'm willing it to be done. It might not, I mean, Mother Nature plays a play in it, but I'm feeling like it's done.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful thing when you can set a goal of any kind and accomplish it. And I heard something very wise. There's a woman named Shelby Stanger, and she has several podcasts, and she has a book coming out called Will to Wild, and it basically she's like encouraging people to take these adventures. And what she did say is though that kind of when you're finishing one adventure, it wouldn't be the worst idea to maybe ponder another or the next because I think a lot of people have a come down or almost yeah, it's like a letdown of I had this thing that I was doing and it was there for me and now it's over. And I think that's a really important point of life. My husband always talks about there was an unnamed either Navy SEAL or military person that said, never let your accomplishments be bigger than never let your accomplishments be greater than your dreams. And I think as we get older, that window starts to narrow because we don't allow ourselves to dream or to think like we could be at an age where it's like, well, maybe what other ways can I participate in? And not in a pressure way. I see a lot of people getting really rigid about like I'm in pursuit versus the way we kind of fall in and move into it in our 20s or teens where it's like, oh well, that kind of is exciting or it turns me on or whatever, and keep doing that forever.
Yeah, no, I have to be very conscientious of allowing myself to have space to play in whatever pursuit I take on because I can turn it into a job. And I'm like, I'm allowed to do life any way I want. Is this really what I want to do with this thing right here? My goal is to have fun. So, how do I remember to add fun and space and play to it all? And one of the things I love about your XPT thing is because it's a foundational process that allows flexibility for people to kind of take pieces maybe deeper or less deep depending on what they need in that moment. And you also build this community of like-minded people that are in pursuit of the lifestyle component. This isn't like, hey, I'm going to be this and this. This is a lifestyle that you're going to adopt and realize that some of these routines, this piece of recovery, I love the breath work, but to be honest with you, that just opens up so much of all the other pieces.
Yeah, and I think the more I'm in the space of let's call it health and wellness, and I put that in quotes. It's like it's your personal sense of self or somewhat peace. I don't want to say like happiness or whatever, because that's a floating in and out emotion. But if you want to talk about real wellness, the pinnacles are sort of like feeling pretty good yourself. And then, okay, what are the practices that are going to support that? All right, I'm going to eat this. Okay, no processed foods, a certain amount of, zone two, everyone's zone two, all these things. So what I think I've learned, especially being around so many high performance people, is that really at the core of these things is, contribution. What's my purpose? Connection with people, meaningful relationships. Doesn't mean a lot of them. It could mean just a few. And then like, okay, these next layers. All right, what am I eating? When do I go to bed? What thing am I wearing that tells me about my, whatever, my resting heart rate, or things like my heart rate variability. So people sometimes put all of that in front of what I'm seeing anyway. Things that really I think are we have to almost start there, and they're harder in different ways. They're not as sexy, but I think if we can land on there first and work out from there, it tends to be easier to pursue this lifestyle.
No, I agree. And it's hard because the shiny pennies of the stats and the numbers and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, it gives you the feedback, and that feedback gets addicting. And we have to watch the feedback in all areas of our life, because I know when I was working, you knew what worked because you got feedback right away. All of a sudden, you shift into mom mode and you have no idea what's working. You're like, we're going to maybe never know, but maybe in 20 years from now, some of these pieces are going to start playing out. And I feel having that combo as a female of, okay, I know how the number piece work. I know how it feels to just hold space and allow what unfolds to unfold, and then figuring out that balance to carry you forward in all your pursuits is definitely something that I'm always kind of keeping tabs on to make sure I'm not getting fed into the other thing.
It's a very good point and distinction between, immediate measurements like, oh, this is working, and that notion of holding space and allowance and being okay with that. And, that the arc on the story can be so long. And also simultaneously, it's funny. It's like even marriage. I've been married a pretty long time, and is also viewing, like I have friends that were married a very long time and then weren't married. And I'm like, yes, but that was a success. Right. So I think sometimes we think unless the arc finishes where we thought, that maybe, oh, well, it's a failure. It's like, well, no, that isn't. Like I always say, if I wasn't married by tomorrow, I've had a very successful marriage. We loved each other. We were nicer to each other way more than we weren't. We handled some tough times pretty well. And so I think that there's another part of that too, which is like making space, but also recognizing successes, even if they look different than, what we started. And I could say that with work, with relationships. I have friendships, even some friendships that maybe we're not really in each other's lives anymore, but for that time it was a success. Yeah, it's a dance though. And the other thing about fitness that I want to bring up too is like, sometimes people think it's, when you talk about shiny pennies, not only the metrics, but the appearance, right? It's like you have to look a certain way and then you're fit. It's like, well, have you ever met like a channel swimmer, or like somebody who's, it's like they're built actually to do that. And if you just saw them, you wouldn't go like, oh, he or she is like ripped. And usually it's women because they have more body,
Fat to be able to float. Yeah.
and it's like, but if you and I went into a, 50-degree weather with her, water, and said, okay, we're going to swim for 8 hours, you'd be like, tap out. So I think the other thing is, the definition of people, for them to be really careful about what are they measuring that makes them healthy and fit.
Oh, so good. I did an interview with Karen Dillon. Karen Dillon worked with Clayton Christensen, who wrote the book, How Will You Measure Your Life? A famous Harvard professor. And just checking, like I had a birthday a couple of days ago, and just checking in with yourself, like, how am I going to measure this next year? What are my goals? What are my achievements? What's my purpose? Where do I want to be? And knowing that from an internal level allows you to really push back on what the external environment might be trying to force upon you. And I love when we just stop and say, who am I? What am I here to bring or to share or to like broaden in this world? And I love that. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
Well, no, I mean, it's true. I mean, listen, I'm 6'3", 180 pounds. I will never be a size two. Like, it's the way it is, right? So I think it's really important for all of us to, it's the notion of in this moment, like even wherever we are, like, do you have a newborn child? Did you just get out of a divorce? Are you starting a new job? In this moment, how can I be my best? And for people to be honest with themselves, right? Like I have the dual thing of like grace, and you're not going to hack your way there either. Like, let's cut the shit. It's going to take a certain amount of work, period. So I think it's kind of sliding in and out of those tones all the time.
With the recovery methods of XPT, right? What are your favorite pieces of that?
I'm the worst because I'm a worker, and I don't see value in things unless I'm like, oh, it's hard. It's like Laird is so good at, he uses the breathing like nobody's business. He does heat and ice constantly. So for me personally, I would say I really think the sauna, getting into hot, is very good for my recovery. In a perfect world, I would say that breathing is a very powerful tool in the sense that you can do it anywhere, it's free, and if and it's part of the essence of life, right? The breath. And so I think it's understanding how to use that as a tool, whether it is to recover, to downregulate, to get ready for a stressful situation. So I would say that it's a, even though everyone's talking about it all the time, and there's a reason it's an ancient practice, is because it is such a powerful source. So the heat is the king of what I seem to have the most time for, and then I would say the breath for sure.
God, I'm so glad you didn't say ice baths. Okay, so I understand the benefit of ice baths, but I tell you, I prefer the heat all day long than the ice baths for me personally. Um, but the breath piece is huge.
You think you're the only one?
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I know, embrace discomfort, embrace discomfort. I'm like, I give myself discomfort 1,000 ways a day. I don't know if I need it in the shower, but it helps.
I was going to say also, so I've begun to add this as a caveat. If people lift weights, don't go into an ice tub right after. You don't want to have at least 4 hours between you and sort of like really difficult training where there's sort of like muscle tearing and inflammation. You want that to occur. Everything else, athletic events, stressful days, I will say the ice for mood regulation and elevation can't be beat. Laird and I joke, yeah, Laird and I joke that you're just happy your body's like, oh yeah, all my problems, yeah, no problems. I'm trying to survive this. But there is data suggesting that for people who have, bouts with anxiety or depression, there's big cold water, like in England, cold water swimming clubs for people who fight, kind of feeling depressed. And it really helps with hormone regulation and mood elevation. So it's a powerful tool in itself, but yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Right. And sometimes the one we probably need the most is the one that's the most uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's what I've kind of noticed on some of them. Like, oh, I'm comfortable doing the other one, probably because it's not that resisting to me as the cold baths. But I climb mountains. Those are cold. I get cold exposure all the time when I have to get out of my tent in the morning. But yeah. And the breath thing, I'm telling you, like doing breath work and connecting to it, it was something that I read about, I like did, but then when you live it and you understand it, and when you're on doing these big feats or have big things coming up, it just gives you so much control. And I am a control freak at some level. And I know that if I can regulate my breath and control my breath, and I'm the person where I start getting anxiety. I'll start humming when I'm climbing. And I didn't even know. Yeah. And I didn't even know. Like, I didn't, that was just something my body naturally did. And we were at this climbing section, and this person next to me is like, you're humming. I'm like, yeah, I know I do that to calm down. I'm sorry. I'm like, buzz for the part. And then I came back and someone sent me an article and said, like, actually, this is part of regulating your parasympathetic nervous system. And there you go.
Yeah, and I think vasodilation too occurs with that. And I think for climbing, it's interesting the breath because, being in that elevation and needing to actually offload your CO2, it's such a powerful tool. So I think that's why I say the breath, in Hawaii, they call it ha, ha is the breath. It's like, I mean, it's what's happening when you hear your baby cry and breathe for the first time. It's like, you understand, all right, they're good, they're here, their breath, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, do you design the high intensity workout aspects of all of it?
Yeah, so I have a different, so I created a program many years, actually long before XPT, called High X. And it came out of like teaching a free community class. I started with like 8 of my girlfriends on Kauai. They closed the gym. And then I'd be at the market or something. It's a small place. And someone would be like, can I join your thing? You know, and so it didn't feel, I'm not going to be a trainer or teach a class. I can't be on the hook for that just because of other things. But I could do it as a community service. So there's, sometimes 80 to 100 people. I charge everyone $1, so they were on my insurance, and I used it as a classroom because I used to joke, but not really, with them that it was not a democracy. It was in fact a dictatorship, and so I really learned. And man, I went to school quick because you have 80 to 100 people, and you have to organize them all, and you have to make it different each time, but sort of doable and modifiable, whatever level you were at. I had 17-year-old girls, I had 35-year-old very fit men, I had 70-year-old women, I had a variety of people. So High X is really came from this community service. It was not an intention to put something together, but it is something that works very, very well. And listen, if anyone ever says, we always say, hey, if someone talks about absolutes, like run for the hills. So it is a thing to do. There is not one thing to do, but it is a very good for people who don't have time. They get bored, they need accountability, and you sort of get time under tension. So lifting weights, you get cardio, you get some mobility, your proprioception and balance, and you get it done in sort of an hour and under.
Yeah, no, I love it. I do it as part of my workout, right? It's not, I have to do endurance so much too, but when you're in the mountains, you'll have those moments where you have to go high, 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 and you need to be able to have your body know that, oh, I know how to come down from this, and I know how to go back up, and I know how to come back down. And so those exercises kind of mimic what can actually happen in the real environment and just lets your body be like, oh, we've been here before. We don't need to freak out. This is okay.
Yeah. I'm just working on balance, like you said. And a lot of times I'll move people from a cardiovascular in the station to the next is working on one leg. So how are you when your heart rate's super high, is trying to stay coordinated and doing something, working on your coordination. So I write it like a story for the body to kind of try to push out those elements here and there. It's a lot of fun for me.
Okay, and you're into the podcasting world too, because why not? Because it's so fun to interview and hear what a better way to learn about what's going on in the world and environment. And yours focuses primarily on mental health and wellness aspect.
Yeah, I wasn't my intention to be, I don't know how my podcast sort of ended up sort of thriving in that mental health space. What I'm trying to do is take kind of the sharp end of the stick of people in performance, whether they're psychiatrists or movement people or doctors of psychedelic controlled trauma resistant treatment, whatever it is, and say, okay, these are the best in class, but let's bring it down to a 6th grade level so people can really understand it. Because my thing is, people maybe who get to live the way Laird and I get to live, they're taken care of. They have the resources, they have the time. How do we take some really cool stuff that's out there that is available for people, but make it achievable? Because people aren't going to have tons of time or money to throw at certain things. But if you go, hey, these 3 things, if you can do these 3 things, or here's an interesting book or thought, or here's a new sort of treatment. I just interviewed somebody who does hypothermia cancer treatment in conjunction with either radiation or chemo, and people are having a lot of success with hard tumors. So it's just kind of trying to say to people, hey, this stuff is out here. Any of it turns you on or could help you or serve you. It interests me. And like you said earlier, it's forced learning. So it keeps me also having to stay progressive, not, well, I know something and then I live and die on the very small amount of information I have, because that's actually dangerous, right? So it's to be continuing to have these conversations and connecting with people. And since the early 90s, I interviewed athletes a ton for TV, and I always loved the learning. And so now I've just branched it out to sort of, even a bigger and really smart group.
Yeah, well, just always remaining a student. And when you have somebody coming on, you have to be ahead of the game so that the interview is good. And I like that. I like that strategy to stay young, Gabby. That's what you're doing. You're staying young there.
Or yeah, not to get a fixed idea, because I could naturally, I think I could easily be a person, because there is a natural rigidity about me that I have to find ways. It's like I tell people, listen, it isn't about wanting to do everything all the time. It's about creating an environment to be successful. And so I just have to also understand or try my best to see all my blind spots and say, okay, where would you set up like concrete? How do you avoid that? And this is certainly one of the ways that can help me from thinking I know anything.
I like it. It's self-awareness at its finest, saying, okay, here's who I am as a default human. Here's how I want to be better. And here's what I need to do to make that happen.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Okay. So 10 years from now, we connect again. What's happened that made you feel like, oh, wow, this is a great decade?
Yeah. Like each other, that, if we enter the same room, that we smile instead of grimace. I feel that feels really important, that I feel healthy and strong. And, my whole thing is, and I hear a lot of people talk about as they age, they start to feel invisible. And there was a great book called Strength to Strength by Albert C. Brooks. And he talks about, jumping from one sort of strength to the next. So as I get older, I think the idea of continuing to learn, but also either to mentor or to help or support other people in the journey, I think feels, and there's a lot of science that shows like people having a sense of purpose or satisfaction in their life is when they have contributed. So having enough still selfishness to be like, I have my work and I have, the things I do, my kids will be long gone by then, that's still occurring, but that also I'm making more time and space maybe to help people that are in an earlier part of the journey, when I can. And certainly to have XPT continuing to thrive. And my hope for Laird Superfood is that it becomes more of a staple and alternative for things people are already doing. One thing I've learned about wellness and health and all these things is we're just asking people to exchange. We're not asking them to add one more thing, just to exchange if it suits their lifestyle and they enjoy it. And so to continue to do that and quite frankly, to make that thing more beastly. I'm interested. It's not all Pollyanna, nice, la, la, la. I like to win. I'd like to be successful because to me, then that's an indication that we're on the right path.
No, I like that. And I feel the superfoods and all that is getting a lot of press, and it seems to be going more mainstream as time evolves. When we were on, here's how I was introduced to it, just to let you know, because it's kind of fun to hear where it all happens. COVID happened, and I live in Park City, Utah. I have 7 kids. I kind of got a vibe that it was going to shut down a ski race. So I called the nanny and I said, hey, listen, I think they're going to cancel school tomorrow. Let's go to Hawaii a little bit early for our spring break. And then let's see what happens. And she's like, sure. So I'm at a gas station looking at my phone. I find a house on the North Shore of Oahu that has a pink fence. Like, we're going to a house that has a pink fence. Are you kidding me right now? So I booked the place. Lady said, yes, you can come in on Saturday. We send the kids to school on Friday. It's Friday afternoon. We have no sign of school. Like, I told the nanny, I'm like, I jumped the gun. I thought they would cancel school. They canceled the ski race. Why wouldn't they cancel school? Blah, 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 blah. And then 2 hours later, they canceled school. So we took the kids the next day to Hawaii, and Hawaii didn't close.
You're lucky you got in.
I know, we got in before, we did. We got in March, and then they didn't close down until April. And so there's this little surf shop on the North Shore that gives you a little coffee before you go in the water every day. And they have the Laird's product there, right? Like, you could get your little coffee with the creamery and all these other MCT oil and all the happy things. And we were addicted to it. And then COVID shut down Hawaii too. And the house that we were renting, they were thrilled that somebody was there. So just stay. So we ended up doing COVID in Hawaii for 6 months. And my son, this is how I knew we were winning. My son comes to me, who's 8 at the time. What did we do for COVID-18? When COVID-20 comes, do you think we could go to Brazil?
That's good instincts by you because, Hawaii shut it hard. And yeah.
They did. But we got lucky. We rented one of these little house. Not a lot of homes are on the water in Hawaii, but by Turtle Bay, there's this little area called Kavela Bay, and you're actually on the water there. So that was our backyard. So we were allowed to be on the beach. And so again, it was one of those things where the heavens above knew I had 7 children and could not handle them indoors at a house in COVID. So it all worked out.
Yeah, we call that clean living, clean living.
Yes, it was perfect. It was perfect. So, all right. Well, how do we, like, people can join experiences, they can be a part of XPT from their home, they can listen to your podcast, direct everybody to your website? Is that the best thing? Because then it branches everybody everywhere else?
Yeah, GabbyReece.com. It's XPTLife.com. It's LairdSuperfood.com. I mean, we are in many grocery stores, but actually getting the product online, because we have some SKUs, because it's expensive to do what we do at Laird Superfood because of our ingredients. And so there's the reality of margin. So there's certain products that we actually only offer online because we're trying. Or my marketing guys, like, I appreciate you're trying to democratize good health, but and then it's the Gabby Reece show. So if there's a guest that maybe can enhance someone's life in some way, they can join us.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Gabby.
Thank you for the conversation.